So let's look a little bit behind the curtains of what's going on in society of Russian Federation and how they survive or they live easily as they used to. So my next information about this. President of Russia Putin in March 2022 said that for the death of a Russian soldier in Ukraine, his family will receive almost 7.5 million rubles and additional payments. We saw that families got cars, then fur coats, now it is some wood, food, or even kitchen supplies. When the families realize that what they got has already been spent and they have lost an asset in the form of a husband, will they protest? And when will it be? This is the question from maybe the audience of Ukrainians. But my question is really they suffer or they just got used to it, or the government somehow tries to ease this situation with a little bit loans, with a little bit money given monthly to the workers of a governmental sector. So how they manage to do this, or they just get used to the situation of poverty?
I think this is unfortunately the frog situation. I think they are trying to make things worse incrementally. So what you will see probably is that the amounts that are being paid will be delayed. Their inflation will go up, and the amounts will not be indexed. I think another thing that's going to happen. By the way, I don't know if the car costs. If the $7.5 million is the cost of a car that they're being given. So in other words, it could be that, they're trying to hide the actual expenditure because, if it's a government enterprise that's producing some kind of, wood, chopping wood or whatever the stories are, or some equipment or, a car or appliances, they're essentially trying to not to give the full amount, but just to give the cost of producing those items, And so that's, of course, that's if it's government owned. I think that this is the story of boiling the frog. The water gets hotter and hotter, and people just kind of slowly getting used to it. That's what that the Russian government for sure is very aware of this issue. That's why they're giving a little something instead of nothing. That's why they are, drafting not from Moscow and St. Petersburg, where there could be potential for revolt. They're drafting people from further and further from far remote areas of Russia, so that it's not visible that the war is having such a devastating effect on the communities, and they'll just keep doing it. The one thing is that I will say is that first, it has a limit, and then second, if you remember the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1991, everything seemed fine one day, and then everything was horrible and collapsing the next day. And unfortunately, that's what's going to happen with Russia. And I think the problem is that it's very difficult to predict such structural breaks. We're very good at predicting, well, if oil price goes up by 5 cents, how much more revenues will somebody get? We can figure that out. But the question is, when will the suffering of Russian consumers and workers and citizens be so bad that they will revolt? That's a very hard one to predict. I can say it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, but I don't know where is that threshold, because the ability to adapt is definitely getting, that's what's been sustaining part of this muted response to sanctions. And then another thing, just remember, when you look at the budget, right, the biggest part of the budget is social expenditures. So military is not the biggest part of the budget, even in Russia, even during war. So they are essentially trying to, there's a lot of room to start cutting little programs, and then, as I said, they'll try to cut them at the, in faraway regions so that nobody rebels, and it's just going to keep happening and happening. The one thing I'll tell you though is that think about this: if you were in a position of Russian government trying to cut and trying to find these sources, the first sources you will use are the easiest ones to implement. So the one thing that's happening for sure is the sources are harder and harder to find. So in other words, first you cut something that you'll be like, we don't need so many, I don't know, police officers in this town, then maybe not so many teachers. But then next time you want to cut, now all of a sudden you're making a big change. Instead of, you might have to close a school, close a hospital, not fix a bridge. So those are much bigger changes. And unfortunately, I think that's where it's going to, that after exhausting all these little sources of savings, the government will have to make more drastic cuts. And by that time, I think that will precipitate, higher level of dissatisfaction.
The only thing that helps now in the social sector of Russia may be that pharmaceutical and food supplies are not in the sanction list. So this is the only thing that saves more or less lives yet still. But it's not the limits. I mean, the food cards that will be implemented, that's not the limits that will stop Russian society from serving Putin, right?
I don't think so. Just seeing the level of poverty, seeing, hearing firsthand stories of, how soldiers behaved in the houses of Ukrainians when they occupied them, in Bucha and Irpin. I mean, it's just disgusting. So, we're talking about a different level of civilization. So when you sort of say that, you will live a little bit uncomfortably, your standard of living is going to drop, it's already so low. And in some parts of Russia, and the people who live on subsistence level, they're going to get their food from, the garden, and they don't care about the appliances and things like that, And so because of that, I don't think that, it will take a while. I guarantee you that it affects them. It's just that for them to feel it, it's going to take a longer time than we might think.